And what that means in terms of college is that women now have about a 15 percentage point higher chance of getting a college degree than men. That 15 percentage points can be compared to the 13 percentage points the other way round in 1972 when Title IX was passed to help women and girls in education. So the gender inequality in US higher education today is bigger than it was when Title IX was passed. It just flipped the other way around, which nobody saw coming. So that's education.
No, I mean,
we can get into the other areas as well. But
it's an incredible success story, however,
amazing
for women and girls.
Incredible.
And when you look at the gains that women and girls have made over the last 50 years, it's staggering, including black women and black girls.
Right.
I mean, there are all sorts of, and I think one of the things that was fascinating in the book is to say, well, yeah, we talk about these other categories and they do matter. But within those categories, if you look at the male-female skew, it's really quite dramatic. Yeah. I mean, compare black men and black women, for example. You have some statistics in one chapter in which you rightly, I think, say the crisis of the black male in America is triply hard. It's an incredibly difficult place to be in right now in the culture. But explain that gender gap within these communities.
Yeah, so what you find is, so there are these overall gender gaps, which we've just said a little bit about in education, and then we can talk about employment maybe a little bit too. But when you then look within racial groups, you see different kinds of gender. There's a gender gap in every racial group, but for black Americans, the gender gap is just much bigger. And for poor Americans, the gender gap is much bigger. So basically, as you move away from the apex of society, then the bigger the gender gaps get. And I think this is one of the huge problems of this debate, frankly, is because most people doing this kind of work are at the top. And they're so busy leaning in, to use Sheryl Sandberg's phrase, that they don't look down. And so you look around and go, well, the men at Brookings seem to be doing okay. But yeah, you're missing what's happening in the rest of society. And for black men in particular, all the gaps we've just talked about are much bigger for black men than for any other group. So in college education, already black women are twice as likely to get a college degree as black men. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio, which is much bigger than for any other group. In the labor market, black men's wages have barely risen for the last 20 years. Black women have almost caught up, and white women have blown right past them. So white women earn much more than black men, which was not true in 79. And so there's this horrible word that Kimberly Crenshaw, which I know you've talked about before, called intersectionality. But applied properly, which I think most of the users don't, what it means is you've got these different intersections, look at them, and don't presume to know in advance which way around it's going to flip. And I think for black Americans, it's uncontroversially true that on almost every measure we care about, black boys and men are worse off than black women and girls. It doesn't mean there aren't still problems for black women and girls. But black men are worse off, and not by chance, but in some cases because they're men. So I think black men face a kind of racialized sexism, which is, again, hard to talk about because you're going to distract attention from the broader push for racial equality. And if you point out how well black women are doing on many fronts, that's seen as in some way diluting the push. And I don't think it is. It's focusing it on where the attention is most needed.
What it's doing is trying to figure out who's actually doing well and who isn't.
Right. Yes, an empirical question.
Because how on earth do we find out who to help?